And then we started a series last weekend called Entrusted, and this one's really all about kind of looking at the reality that we have with kind of our place in life, our place in the world. If you missed that conversation last week, make sure to catch up online. We talked a little bit. I'll give you a quick review of it, but here's kind of what we said. We said, here's the reality of our situation. We said, God is the creator of all things, right? He made everything. He created all that we know and see, and he made us. And then what he decided to do is he would look at kind of you and I and say, I'm going to entrust you with a slice of what I've made, right? I'm going to give you skills and abilities and relationships and kind of a lifetime of some sort to be in creation. And what I want you to do is kind of take what I've given you and honor me with it. And I'm putting it in your hands, and I'm entrusting it to you. And one of the things we said last week is that we have largely kind of failed at that in different ways. And even in our failure in it, God would look at us and offer to forgive us, and then not only forgive us, but he would entrust us with his name, with the family name. And he'd say, I want you to represent me, not only kind of with the physical stuff that I created, but with the spiritual stuff, with the reality of being my son or my daughter, and I want to forgive you and include you in all of that. We said when we look to Jesus, that is what's going on, is he is forgiving us of our sin, including us in the family of God, and choosing to give us a new life, and we actually get entrusted with more, even though we have failed God in a whole bunch of ways. And that is mind-blowing. And if you missed that longer conversation, catch that up online if you want. YouTube, you can grab that and get caught up that way. What we're going to do today, though, is a really important conversation. And this is one that I personally struggle with and have struggled with my whole walk with Jesus. In various seasons, this has been difficult for me kind of every step of the way, and has been an area I've had to focus on every time I bumped into it. And there's some conversations as a pastor I can walk in and say, man, I'm so excited about this one. I got my head around it. It's maybe easy to say yes to God in some places. This one's always a struggle. And here's what it's going to look like, right? We're going to dive into it. What do I do when I'm in a situation or a space, right, in time or in life that I didn't choose? I'm set into a set of circumstances that are less than ideal, and I don't want to be here. And maybe it's a job or a relationship, or there's things that are in this scenario in my life and in this time and space where I don't have control over it, and I can't define it, and I wouldn't pick it, and now I'm here. And I kind of have to live through this season. And there's no real way to get out of it. All right, I kind of have to be in the midst of it. I remember when we were young married, a couple, we got married pretty young, and I remember praying to the Lord, asking for a job. I was like, I need benefits. I'm a husband now. I was like, oof, I got to provide. And so I remember just praying, and Lori and I praying and saying, God, we need a job. And it was kind of an amazing thing. I was younger in my faith. I only knew the Lord for a few years, and we prayed for a few weeks, and then we're kind of asking around, and out of nowhere, we thought we had an opportunity at Allstate to go at a call center. I was like, I will take anything that has benefits, I'm in. And they were like, we're full, we're right, no opportunities available. We kept praying, and then we got a call and said one spot opened up, and I was like, I did it, right? God answered the prayer, and I'm in. I got a job. This is going to be amazing. Well, I go into this job, and nothing against Allstate. The job, I have zero fit to be a call center person, to sit in a booth and have a headset and answer phone calls all day. And I did that for about 3 days. I was like, this is going to be a long year, right? This is going to be a lot for me. Just not my wiring whatsoever. And I remember being in that season, and I remember thinking, man, Lord, this is what you provided. I prayed for this. The job itself actually paid for my college tuition. All kinds of stuff about it were incredible, right? Benefits. And if I got to pick, I wouldn't do anything that I would do in that job. How do I live in this thing? And I remember having to really fight for perspective, really fight to embrace the thing that I was in the middle of, and it was the thing that God had me in the middle of, at least in that time. It was his way of providing. It was his moment of showing me an answer to prayer. I believe all that. And there was some stuff that God was doing in me in that season that needed to happen, even though I wouldn't choose it and it didn't feel very good. Make sense? A bunch of us are going to be in scenarios like that. We're in the middle of being entrusted with something that we don't really want, we wouldn't necessarily pick, and if we're honest, we probably dream about some other scenario that we wish we were in. If I was in the next phase, if I was done with college, if I had their marriage, right? These might not be things that we said out loud, but we would wrestle with them and think, if I was in the next house and out of this one, if I could buy instead of rent, if I you name it, right? If I was in the middle of caring for this thing, if I could get some sleep and the kids were a little bit older, whatever it looks like, we tend to drift into imagining some other scenario, somebody else's lot in life, and think, I would love to be entrusted with that one. How about not this one? How come I'm in the middle of this kind of crucible? And sometimes this thing really pushes us to the limits because we're in a situation we don't have control over. Other people maybe define it. Maybe we're in the middle of some version of persecution or tension in relationships. Maybe it's a work situation or school or home or neighborhood where there's friction involved, and the temptation is to focus and put our focus on trying to run, on trying to get out of this and get into this, or to get out of the inevitable pressure that comes from living this thing out. Make sense? What we're going to do today is we're going to take a look at somebody's life that I'm super inspired by. We're only going to be able to see like a small snapshot of it, but we're going to watch as Daniel responds and reacts to kind of the situation that he didn't have any control over as he got planted into a situation. And I'm inspired by the way that he interacts with it. I'm positive that he would struggle with it too, but I think we can see ourselves in the story. So we're going to dive into it. Here's what Daniel tells us in Daniel chapter 1, verse 1. Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. So let me give you a little bit of background on what's going on here. Hundreds of years before this, what would have happened is God would have made some promises to the nation of Israel, and he would have looked at them and said, hey, guys, I'm paraphrasing it. He's going to say, I'm going to put before you a blessing and a curse. If you listen to me and you trust me and you do what I'm asking you to do, I'm going to pour out my blessing on you. And things are going to work for you, and it's going to be amazing, right? That's the short version. So the flip side is the curse. If you disobey me, you don't trust me, and you don't walk in my ways, then things are going to be very rough. And one of the ways that it's going to be rough is eventually this land that I'm gifting you with, that you're going to move into, another nation bigger and stronger than you will come and take you away, pull you out of that nation, and pull you back to their nation. And you'll find yourself in exile. And that's actually what's happening right now as we interact with Daniel. His ancestors had been disobedient to God, and now he finds himself in a situation where he probably wasn't the one that caused the exile, but he's the one that's receiving it. It's his generation that's receiving this moment where another nation, Babylon, is going to come and, in essence, just grab chunks of people and take them away and kidnap them and pull them into another nation. So this is what's going on. This is what's playing out. Nebuchadnezzar has attacked Jerusalem, and now this is how the story unfolds here in verse 3. It says, then the king ordered Ashpenaz, chief of the court officials, to bring into the king's service some of the Israelites from the royal family and nobility. This is going to pick some people that were, in essence, royalty in Israel. And these are young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. I love that there are multiple stories in the Bible where it says the guys were handsome. I just wonder who wrote these, right? Like, was this like self-authored sometime? Who decided to add that detail? I think it's super fun that Riz continues to show up over and over again, right? So here's the idea, though, is they're looking for these young, sharp guys that are ready to be trained in what the king of Israel is trying, or king of Babylon is trying to do, is he's trying to get the Israel out of them and to get Babylon into them, right? And so he's going to train them and get all that stuff out and enculturate them and put them into service. In essence, there's slaves that have been captured, and now they're going to be put into service for the king and for Babylon. Daniel would be one of these guys, right? It says he was to teach them the language and literature of the Babylonians. The king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. They were to be trained for 3 years, and after that, they were entered the king's service. So let's just get our head around this for a minute, right? You're Daniel. You're in Israel. You're a sharp person that actually has some opportunities and possibilities. I imagine, we don't know, the Bible doesn't tell us, but I imagine that Daniel probably had some hopes and dreams for his life that had nothing to do with living in Babylon. I think we'd be pretty confident saying that. Probably he didn't imagine that his life was going to look like this, that it was going to be planted in a foreign land and he was going to be asked to do things that he did not necessarily sign up to do, probably didn't want to do, right, in a foreign place, disconnected from probably chunks of his family. And now the next 3 years of his life are going to be totally different than whatever he would have envisioned himself doing. He did not choose this, didn't choose to be where he was. Whatever he wanted to be doing, right, he wasn't going to be there, right? This is where he is, where I am. And this is probably where he wants to be. And this is something that you and I think, can all kind of relate to. There's a version of life that we probably kind of wish at least something in our life was very different. Maybe big, huge chunks of it. Maybe that somebody would act differently. Maybe that something would get resolved. Maybe that a season of our life is fast forwarded so we don't have to be in this part anymore. Right? So school would be done and I'd be on to the next, or we'd be done, whatever it is. How do I be where I am, right? Even if it's not where I want to be? And specifically, if where I am was chosen for me and I had little control over it. Certainly Daniel would have felt that. I can only imagine the difficulty and challenge and even grief that he would experience being uprooted from his homeland and now given this task on top of all of that, right? All of this is gone. Now he's planted here. Imagine. And you and I find ourselves sometimes in situations like this. A work situation that it's not quite what we wanted or planned. We didn't think we would be here by this point in our lives. We got to finish the thing we're in, finish the semester, the school year, the whatever we're in the thick of. We didn't think the relationship would end this way. We thought we would find a romantic partner by now, but didn't. I thought I wouldn't be single by now, but I am. Right, over and over, we kind of find ourselves wishing that the thing was different, and now I got to figure out, how do I be entrusted with reality, the reality of what I find myself in, even if it's not what I want. This is, in essence, what he would be in the thick of, right? And what we're going to see here in a minute is this, that Daniel would find a way through it. He'd find a way to embrace it. And this is what so inspires me, right? It is something I think that we can walk away with, is this, that sometimes we're entrusted with a situation that we wouldn't choose, right? And finding a way to honor God and kind of in the middle of it is the key to faithfulness. How do I, here's the question, right? How do I honor God with where I am? How do I honor God with where I am? In the middle of the imperfection, the not so ideal scenario, what does it look like to honor God in this? Not here. We would love to honor God here because that's where, but that's not where I am. This is where I am. How do I do that one? And this is where Daniel is going to offer an incredible example for us. Here's what the story lays out. It says in verse 8, Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine. And he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself in this way. Now God had caused the official to show favor and compassion to Daniel. But the official told Daniel, I'm afraid of my lord the king, who has assigned your food and drink. Why should he see you looking worse than the other men at your age? The king would then have my head because of you. So here's what's going on. Daniel, in his training, he would have been given access to like luxurious food. Some of that food probably would have been illegal for him to eat as an Israelite, right? He would have legal requirements right in the Old Testament that said you can't eat this, but probably not all of it. Some of the food he would have been allowed to eat, but he would look and say, I'm going to resist being enculturated into Babylon. I'm going to hold on to some of my distinctness as an Israelite. I'm not going to eat the food that the king is offering. And he resolves in his heart to honor God in that way, right? He looks at the situation. And by the way, there would have been all kinds of things in his purview, in his life and situation that would be dishonoring to God everywhere. Nothing about what he is around and surrounded by would be honoring to God. They're literally serving another God, right? So you could look anywhere, and you're gonna hit that target if you're looking for something that is against kind of who God is. He finds a way to honor God in the midst of the situation, and he anchors into it. What I love is this is exactly what you and I can do. There's probably something that we could cling into or hold on to. There's a way, and often it's difficult and uncomfortable, to honor God in the midst of our lot in life, the thing that we've been entrusted with. And right, as I grab hold of that, whether that's finding contentment in where I am or choosing to pray for my boss instead of complain about them, whatever you land with, honoring God and resolving in our hearts to find ways to do that is critical. Here's what I really love, though. He doesn't just anchor into a conclusion on how to honor God. He actually finds a way to do it with tact and wisdom. Here's what I mean. He could have said, hey, I'm not going to eat this king's food, and he could have thrown a fit about it. Right? This is what we see a lot in our culture. All right, if somebody makes a resolution, they resolve something. I struggle with this too. Right? If I find the right thing, usually I don't always go about doing it the right way. And those things need to be connected together. When I resolve to do right, I don't have to get a bullhorn and tell everybody how wrong they are. I don't have to post on social media. Look what he does. He makes a resolution, and then what he does is he goes and he asks for permission from the guard. He humbles himself, and he asks. Look at that. That is wildly different than many of our instincts, mine included. He asks for permission. And when, right, look what kind of the takeaway is, right? He goes and he says, hey, can we do this? The guard is resistant. He says, man, you can't do that. If I don't feed you and feed everybody else, you're going to look like trash and I'm going to be in trouble, right? And Daniel, though, has resolved this thing, but he goes about it in a unique way, in a way that shows humility and wisdom. And here's our takeaway for this, right? What we want to do is we don't want to just look to do the right thing. We want to look to do it in the right way, right? We don't want to just look to do the right thing. We want to do it in the right way. I might resolve, I'm going to honor God in my relationship. I still have to find the right way to approach that conversation in that relationship. I might decide, you know what, I'm not going to cut a corner that my boss wants me to cut. But you know what, I still have to find the right way to win relationally, or at least attempt to, and show up with gentleness and humility and respect in that relationship. This is the part that I have messed up over and over and over again. When I'm like, man, I found the right thing to do, now I'm going to run you over with a bulldozer because I'm right. Anybody else relate? It's just how it is. Daniel blows my mind because he does the right thing, and he does it in the right way. I love this. This reminds me of a verse that I keep when I'm talking to people about tricky scenarios in this bubble. This is the one I come back to over and over again. It's something that Jesus said to his disciples when they were being sent out to preach. He says this, I'm sending you out like sheep among wolves, therefore be as shrewd as snakes and as innocent as doves. He looks and says, here's what I want you to do. I want you to be innocent. Innocent in your heart, innocent in your conduct, and I want you to be shrewd or wise. What does that mean? It means I want to do the right thing, but I want to approach the right thing in the right way. I'm going to honor God in my decision making, but my right choosing isn't necessarily, it's not a license for me to be foolish. It's not a license for me to go blow people up on social media. I might be right and do it in the wrong way and mess the whole scenario up and lose all kinds of impact in the process. And Daniel would show us the way to do that. He's resolved to do this. He's decided he's going to do it. He asks for permission. The guy says no. What happens next? Next in the story, here's the next play out. Here we go. Daniel then said to the guard, whom the chief official had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, he says, please test your servants for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. Daniel comes up with a creative plan. He says, okay, here, let's try this. Try this, right? Here's an idea. How about 10 days of this? He doesn't stop with the first no. He presses into it, and he comes up with another solution, and he gets creative. And here's what he says. Let's try it for 10 days, then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the royal food, and treat your servants in accordance with what you see. So he agreed to this, and he tested them for 10 days. The guard was scared. Daniel asked for permission. Daniel then gets creative. I love this. This is it's so convicting to me and so inspiring to me. But here's how I think what often happens is this. Often it takes both perseverance and creativity to pursue God's best. God's like, listen, I have you here, not here. Get creative. Find a way to honor me in the middle of it. Use your imagination. Well, Ryan, I don't like the job that I'm in. How about you sit down for 5 minutes and work on this question? What could I do to honor God in this job right here, right now? I bet you would come up with 10 phenomenal ideas. This is what's so convicting, is I know this and I don't always do it, and it wrecks me every time. But my marriage is messed up. I'm about to be done. What are we going to do about it? Right? I hear these things all. If you sat for 5 minutes and said, what are some things that we might do to see God move in our marriage? Have you gone to counseling? Have you tried a retreat? Have you reached out for help? I'm just sick of him. I'm just done with her. A little creativity, a little bit of, Lord, how do I honor you? Here's the mind and the thought and the resources and the ways and what could God do? How do I honor God in the midst of the thing I don't want to be in right now? I have to be in a classroom 40 hours a week. What does it look like to honor God? Come up with some creative ways to do it. What if you're in a relational tension right now where there's not peace? Is there perseverance needed to move towards a place of peace? Let me just say this. If you're a follower of Jesus today and you have not done all that you can do as far as it depends on you to be at peace with other followers of Jesus especially, but with all people, This is a critical thing to move towards. This is what God longs for you to do. You may not be able to achieve peace. You may not be able to get there. That's why the verse says, as far as it depends on you. But a little bit of perseverance and a little bit of creativity and a little bit of, now all of a sudden we're moving into where God might have us go, and might he work through that. See, Daniel, he presses into it. He's actually making his life a little bit harder, but he's honoring God in the thick of it, right? And while Daniel could have been consumed with why me's, God, why do you have me here? Why did you take me from my country? Why do I have to do this? These people are terrible. None of them love you, right? You name it. He's got unlimited reasons to throw in the towel and disengage. And instead what he does is he leans in and he finds a way to honor God in the thick of it. He uses his creativity and he doesn't relent. He's resolved to find a way to honor God in the thick of it. Now, this is the end of the 10 days. They looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. So the guard took away their choice food and the wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables instead. Kind of won this guard over. And then here's how the story unfolds. It says, to these 4 young men, God gave knowledge and learning, knowledge and understanding of all kinds. All kinds of literature and learning. And Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds. At the end of the time set by the king to bring them into his service, the chief presented them to Nebuchadnezzar. The king talked with them, and he found none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the king's service. In every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his whole kingdom. Daniel goes through the whole journey. 3 years. Learning stuff, studying, working on things that he wouldn't pick to learn. He wouldn't pick to be there. And he comes out the other side like gold. And actually, as the story advances, what we find is Daniel ends up being given responsibility over the province of Babylon. And this is what I find is often what will happen is as we're faithful with this, it's not very often that God has given me this triangle, the exactly what I want triangle. What God has often done is God has often given me some other thing that I never expected that actually puts me in a place either of greater impact or it scratches kind of the itches of my heart to be used by him. It's some of the stuff I thought would make sense or be helpful here, and instead God creates some other thing that is wonderful and powerful and different. Sometimes it's very hard. But what's going on in this space is this. As we are faithful in the season that God has us, as we say yes to God where we are, even if it's very imperfectly, it's him that moves us into this new place. And he grows in us. He grows in us a passion to pursue him and the ability to bear different kinds of weight. And he turns us into the kind of person that's ready to live this next leg out. We weren't ready for that today. We're ready for it after we go through this. And God tends to entrust more and more to his faithful servants, and he moves and blesses and leads through it. And we see that happen in Daniel. Guys, there's very little that is ideal about Daniel's situation. And probably if we dug into our stories, I bet you we'd find pieces of your situation that are very frustrating. Maybe very painful. Maybe just boring. Right? And mundane. Maybe there's pieces of life that just feel like they're going to last forever, and why am I in this thing right here, right now? Here's the big takeaway. I don't want you to miss it, right? If you don't catch anything else, catch this one. It doesn't have to be an ideal situation to give an ideal response. I don't have to have God fix everybody in my life in order to say yes to him. I don't have to have God work in somebody for me to forgive. I can choose that. I don't have to have my boss change in order for me to show up the right way at work. I can make a decision to say, I'm responsible for my response. I'm going to show up ideally in the ways that I can. And guys, I would just look at you and say, this is the piece that's a struggle for me. Right? Because what happens in my life is I might jump into a new triangle in life and say, man, I'm going to do this well. And then I get so deep into it that I start to miss the point, that the point of being where I am, it isn't to win the thing, it's not to fight the person, it's not to do the whatever, it's to honor God. It's to have a response to him with whatever he's placed me in the middle of. That's what I'm entrusted with. When I start to get my head and my heart around that, all the things start to get a little bit clearer. What's clear is God has placed me here for a time and a purpose and a reason, and to know that he is trying to do something in me, and he's trying to do something through me, gives me a confidence to stay in it, to not try to escape it or fight my way out of it like a cornered animal, but to look and say, all right, God, this is where I am. That I'm going to trust that you know what's best. One of my favorite pictures of this, man, is if you guys have ever lifted weights before, I remember my stepdad taught me how to bench press when I was a little kid. And when you're on the bench and there's weight on there, especially if you're adding weight to it, there's a temptation, and I would do this sometimes where I would squirm on the bench and writhe as the weight's coming down, kind of push it back up and start to squirm, and I pull something in my neck doing that, right? Here's what I learned, that what I should do, right, when it's heavy is, the point is you allow the weight to lead you to failure. It's in failure that I actually get stronger. I let the weight do the work. And when you just kind of there's a spotter, right? There's somebody there to help you. And when I let the weight do the work, I'm going to come out stronger every time. And that's actually what's going on here. God is looking at us and he's saying, hey, I know what you're in the thick of is unpleasant or crushing or boring or tense. Let the weight do the work. Stop squirming. Stop squirming. Let the weight create you into something more than you have been. Someone that looks more and more like my son. Trust me in it. I've got the weight. I'm your spotter. I'm right there with you. So guys, here's a few questions we might walk away with. Here's a few questions. I might ask you the question, what's your space you're in the middle of that you wish you could get out of? Right? Is it a relationship? Is it a season? Is it an assignment? Where you would look and say, man, I wish I could just remove myself from that. And what is the thing that God is asking you to do right where you are? Is there a way to honor him? Is there a way to thank him, even in the midst of discomfort or difficulty? Here's the other question. What's the weight on the bar that's crushing you right now? And will you let it do its work? God's not punishing you. He's not against you. Here's the thing I struggle to remember sometimes. There's not just the weird thing that I'm in the middle of and the people that I'm frustrated with. This is all something that God is allowing, and he's changing you and I on the inside if we let the weight do the work. I don't need, right? We don't need the people in our lives to change for the weight to do the work. We don't need the circumstances to change for God to move and change in us. We don't need the ideal to play out for our response to show up in an ideal way. Jesus would say, pray for those who persecute you. Love your enemies. So when we're in the middle of the cooker, right, middle of the pressure, I want to look at that and say, God, I see that you've entrusted that to me. That you're doing that not against me, but because you're trying to make me into something more. Right? If you walked into a room and you didn't know what lifting weights was and it just looked like somebody was being crushed by a bunch of barbells, you would think that was a torture device. In fact, it's a strengthening device. You're being made into more. And in the right hands, that same thing is happening in our lives. Can I see it like Daniel? Recognizing that God himself is choosing to work in me and through me if I allow that to play out. Because as the band comes up, would you bow your heads, close your eyes with me as we wrestle this through? Father, today we just want to recognize that where we are today is not an accident. That there's probably things that are happening in and around us that break your heart. There are difficulties that are playing out, but the pressure of them and the difficulty of them is making us into someone that looks more and more like you, Jesus. God, I pray that you would help us. Help me with this, Lord. Help us to be fully where we are, fully where you have us. And in the middle of that tense relationship, in the middle of that thing we are trying to escape, would you help us to show up in it? Not just endure it, not just survive it, but to see your power and your love and your transformation show up right in the middle of our lives. God, would you help us with this? Meet us here, even now.